Errol Barnett is outside the Supreme Court. Errol, give us a sense of the day. What have you seen and witnessed?
Well, this is the finish line. The destination for the marchers is what you see behind me, the halls of the Supreme Court, where currently the justices are split 4-4 as far as being conservative and liberal. And what these demonstrators want is for someone who can replace the late Justice Antonin Scalia with his conservative, constitutionalist and pro-life views. So around me, tens of thousands of pro-life protesters have made it up that many-mile stretch from the Washington Monument, where Vice President Mike Pence became the first sitting vice president to address this crowd, who have marched every year since Roe versus Wade was decided here, essentially allowing states and allowing abortions to be legal on the federal level, restricting states' abilities to control and restrict those rights. As I was marching here with these demonstrators, many of them coming from religious schools and institutions as well as churches, I also spoke with Governor Sam Brownback from Kansas, who is one of the most conservative governors as it relates to putting in policies that restrict abortions. He's really a darling, you could say, of this pro-life movement. And he says that the reason he wants to see Roe versus Wade overturned is so that states like his can take actions that restrict women's access to abortions in any situation. What the pro-choice people say is that abortions sometimes are necessary to save the life of mothers, or perhaps when there's some kind of medical issue with the fetus, essentially. What we heard today from Vice President Pence was, he said, science and medicine is getting so far along as to helping children with any birth defects survive, helping them live full and prosperous lives. Interesting when you consider Donald Trump has pledged to repeal Obamacare, which extended medical insurance to tens of millions of Americans. But for this group, this is a cause of belief and conviction. This is not something you can simply talk to someone and convince them otherwise of. I spoke with the president of Students for Life of America, and she told me that despite the fact that some 70% of respondents in a Pew survey believe Roe versus Wade should stay in place, she said people she talks to and her members across the country are passionate in saying that it should be overturned. It is one of the most divisive issues in the United States, and it's very difficult to find common ground between the two sides. And for this group, they saw last week some massive numbers of people coming to Washington for the Women's March. Some pro-life organizations wanted to attend and said that they were either ignored or told not to join in. So this, despite being the fact that it's an annual rally this year, they feel as if they have some momentum, some enthusiasm, because President Trump has already restricted U.S. federal funds from being used overseas to conduct abortions with organizations that carry them out. And he's pledged to be a pro-life president and nominate someone to the Supreme Court who would be pro-life and potentially overturn Roe versus Wade. It's a very tall order. The chances are very slim, but for this gathering of people, which today it seems as if they're in the tens of thousands. It's always tricky business trying to estimate crowd numbers, but for them, they believe for the first time in a very long time, they have the momentum they need. Public opinion may be on the side of the pro-choice movement, but the U.S. administration, the executive branch, and of course with both majorities in the House and in the Senate, certainly is on the side of the pro-life movement. So it's something that we'll see continue to unfold in the weeks and months ahead. But today, for the pro-life supporters, this is a day they feel is really all theirs.
Errol, we saw a couple of defund Planned Parenthood signs in the crowd. Were you able to talk to people? Do they believe that this is something that really will happen under this administration?
Well, there certainly has been the threat from Congress to pull federal funds completely for Planned Parenthood. The pro-choice movement and Planned Parenthood itself says that only about 3% of the funds they receive even go toward things like paying for abortions. The rest go toward things like education and health care for young women, especially in vulnerable places or places where women may not have the funds to cross state borders or go long distances to find help. These rally goers, and again, I'm telling you, these are mostly religious groups, religious schools and churches. They are passionate in their belief that in no circumstance should abortion be legal, or should their tax-paying dollars, their federal funds, be used to support such a move. But we have to just mention that rally last week where an estimated 500,000 people came here to Washington and filled the mall carrying their own message, was sponsored in part by Planned Parenthood, and there was a very kind of pro-choice message with that group as well. So it all just depends on what the Congress people here think of what these rally goers believe. And it's significant that President Trump has said, even in a tweet today, that these rally goers have his full support. He did not mention directly the Women's March attendees last week. So it gives you a sense of whose side the administration is on. They are unapologetic about that. And Vice President Mike Pence today said, the life movement is winning.
Errol Barnett outside the Supreme Court. Thank you, Errol.
Sure.